Our panel of guests now to take us through all of this. Joining me on set is Tamar Kamut, Assistant Professor of Public Policy at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Mohammed Dali, a Palestinian lawyer based in occupied East Jerusalem, is with us, as well as Akiva, eldar, a political analyst and contributor to the Haaretz newspaper. Thank you all very much for joining us. Akiva, if I can begin with you, please. I mean, you're in Tel Aviv. Can you just explain how all of this is being viewed there? Is it being ignored or dismissed completely?
Well, I can tell you that in my newspaper, in Haaretz, today you can find it here on page 4. And here you can see the report about the cabinet's meeting yesterday about the American outline. So you see it's just minimized, and the Israeli public is busy with two different issues. First of all, the captives, what is the future of the negotiations with Hamas, and the other thing that how long will it take until we bring down the Netanyahu radical right government? And the discussion in the International Court of Justice and what was just reported about the situation in Gaza is, if I may, it's a collateral damage of Netanyahu's regime. And the Israelis are more concerned about the next steps that President Biden may take or may not take, which means if he will decide that he cannot afford to supply more weapons and shells to Israel because he's got his own political problems to be concerned about in the upcoming elections. So,
I want to, you touched on this a little bit, but I want to talk through a little bit more of the responsibilities that Netanyahu and the Israeli government has, because under international humanitarian law, Israel as an occupying power does have certain responsibilities. The occupied territory must be administered for the benefit of the local population, in this case Palestinians, but Israel enforces discriminatory laws and policies, subjecting Palestinians, even children, to military rather than civilian courts. Now, the laws state public order and safety must be ensured. However, armed settler attacks are at record levels, as we've been reporting. And Israel must not displace the local population or move its own civilians into the territory. But an estimated 750,000 Israeli settlers inhabit about 300 settlements in the occupied West Bank as well as East Jerusalem. And the occupying power, Israel, is also forbidden from enforcing collective punishment on the local population, but Israel routinely destroys infrastructure, demolishes homes and digs up roads, as we have seen time and time again. So, Akiva, I want to go back to you on this, because why do you think Israel has failed to fulfil its responsibilities as an occupying force?
The answer, Tom, is very short: because they can. Because the price tag for doing it for 57 years was close to zero. As long as you can have it both ways, you can occupy the territories, you can get the American support. The international community, in the best case, will publish some soft statements against the occupation and violation of human rights in the occupied territories, and the business as usual. So if you are an Israeli politician, even not from the Likud, look at what Benny Gantz, the leader of the so-called Center Party, said yesterday, that a Palestinian state is not on the table now. And now Israel is playing the victim. And this is the paradox, that on one hand, Israel is the last colonial state in the Western society. On the other hand, if you ask the Israeli in the street, he will tell you that we are the victims of terror.
OK. Mohammed, I want to bring you in now in regards to the ICJ hearing that is going to begin in the next hour or so. What are the potential legal consequences for Israel here?
And this is a big day. This is a big day because the Palestinians have been waiting this for decades. The Palestinians have been trying to use international law and to use international diplomacy and to use the mechanisms within the United Nations. But so far, all these mechanisms did not really help them in changing the reality on the ground. Today, with the hearing at the ICJ and hopefully the advisory opinion that will come at the end of those hearings, there might be a change. There might be a change because the Palestinians are not able so far to get rid of the Israeli occupation and to get rid of the Israeli apartheid, especially in the occupied Palestinian territories in the West Bank and Gaza, through diplomatic or political or even local resistance on the ground. This addition now of an advisory opinion by the International Court might mean actually that many countries in the world will have on a legal basis to deal with the Israeli occupation and maybe even the Israeli state and the Israeli government on a different way. One example for that was the decision that was issued by a court in the Netherlands just 10 days ago, preventing military companies from the Netherlands to export parts of the F-35 airplanes to Israel. Such decisions actually might make a big difference. And if the advisory opinion at the end of the day says that that the settlements are illegal, which is obvious under international law, and many other policies that Israel is actually conducting in the occupied territories are in contrary with international law. And it goes beyond that because that's what the General Assembly has asked the court to decide on.
Yes.
The responsibilities and the duties of other state parties, of all the countries in the world. So if the advisory opinion says that those countries should refrain from certain policies in dealing with the Israeli government or in dealing with Israel, that might actually bring about a huge change and might influence even the Israeli public opinion.
Potentially a huge change, but it seems like any sort of resolution to this is a long way off, because despite international calls for a two-state solution, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu keeps on sticking to his position. He has posted on X saying Israel rejects international calls for a permanent settlement with the Palestinians, and Israel will continue to oppose the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. Okay, Tama, just in regards to this, I mean, will these statements that we've heard time and time again from Netanyahu rejecting any sort of two-state solution, from Netanyahu as well as everyone else seemingly in his cabinet, is that going to affect, do you think, how the ICJ deals with and sees this hearing?
Of course it has to. I mean, this is the Israeli leader going against everyone, even international community, even his closest allies, even in the West, in the US. I mean, it's good that we have been hearing many Western leaders, including Joseph Borrell, even President Biden. They're all now talking the talk when it comes to the need for a two-state solution and end of this conflict. And Netanyahu is rejecting all these calls. And I think it's a moment of truth for Israel's key allies in the West, especially the US, to take a position. Enough with the talk now. What are the tools? How are you going to pressure Netanyahu and the Israeli government to go for peace? I mean, even many Israelis and many, including the Jewish lobby in the US, they're all now saying that Netanyahu is a risk for Israel itself, its own existence. Because if occupation doesn't end, then the next scenario is a one-state or a one-state solution. I mean, many analysts are starting to talk about this.
Yes.
If Palestinians have no prospect whatsoever to have their own state, then it's one-state solution, a binational state. I mean, name it. There are so many discussions. So the Israelis will have to face this reality as well. It's not leading them anywhere. So what are they going to do with the 5 to 7 million Palestinians inside the occupied land?
Yeah.
They're there, they're not going to go anywhere.
Well, I guess many are hoping that the ICJ's hearings will actually force Israel to take a look at what it is doing. As we mentioned before, there's an unprecedented number of countries that are involved over the next week at the ICJ. I think 52, as well as 3 other groups. I mean, that's a very, very strong, significant number, isn't it? Is there strength in numbers, and will that help put extra pressure on Israel?
Yes, your guest from Tel Aviv, he referred to the international community. The international community is a very fuzzy, vague term politically. I mean, when we ask what's international community, what is it? Is it like the West? Is it Russia? Is it China?
Yeah.
Is it the globe? But now for the first time we see, I would emphasize on the willingness and the pressure coming from the global South countries, and that's very important. Most of these countries, the 52 countries which submitted their cases to the ICJ on Palestine, on the legal consequences of the occupation, they come from the global South, and we see this rift now, this momentum where, many countries have more or less hope on the UN with the official formal mechanisms to apply international law, and they're acting now from their conscience, from their moral positions they have taken. And I think this is important. So the question to the other countries in the world, do we want a unified globe under one UN, under the international law, or we want to be more fragmented? The war in Ukraine has caused fragmentation. Gaza now is causing more fragmentation. And I think the international globe has to stand to this and say, well, enough is enough. We need to be united. We need to apply international law without any complicity, without any double standards.
Mohammed, I want to go back to you now. The Palestinians are presenting at the ICJ today. I believe they've got about 3 or 4 hours to do so. What are you expecting? What are you hoping to hear from them as they outline the issues that they face on a daily basis?
It's the first thing that they have to tackle is that, occupation under international law is a temporary measure. Occupation happens when there is a war, but this has to end. And the Israeli occupation is not ending. It's the longest occupation in modern time. And it doesn't seem that there is a date for it to end. The second thing would be that it's a different kind of occupation because it's a settler colonial occupation. It's an occupation that its main aim is actually to try and ethnically cleanse the indigenous population and annex certain parts of the occupied territory and bring the citizens of the occupying power of the state of Israel to live in the occupied territories, which is, as we know, is contrary to international law and is even a war crime under the Rome Convention. The third thing would be, of course, the status of Jerusalem and the separation of East Jerusalem from the rest of the West Bank. This is a very important issue, and it's becoming more and more important those days when we are coming, when Ramadan is coming soon, and the inability of Palestinians to worship and exercise their freedom of religion in praying at the Al-Aqsa Mosque during this holy month. And we just heard about the new policies that the Israeli National Security Minister Ben-Gvir wants to enforce. So all these actions, this is on the macro level. On the micro level, there are so many instances that your reporters have just explained in the reports that we heard previously. But it's the daily life of a Palestinian from the minute that he wakes up until he goes to sleep is filled with injustices, with suppression, with oppression, with human rights violations, whether it's the freedom of movement, whether it's the ability to work, whether it's the ability to build a house for themselves, whether it's their ability to leave the country or come back to the country, or their ability to protest, or their freedom of speech, or to say anything on social media or in the newspapers. They are at risk at all times. And as human rights organizations internationally and locally, including Israeli human rights organizations, have characterized the situation here in the occupied territories as apartheid, I think the time has come that this apartheid regime gets actually an international legal stamp by the highest court in the world, the ICJ, saying that it is so and it should be dismantled.
Well, we'll be keeping a very close eye on how that all unfolds at the ICJ in about an hour and a half or so. Thank you so much, Tamer, Mohammed and Akiva. We really do appreciate your time here on Al Jazeera.